Hello everyone, and welcome to the start of a new series of Chainsaw Man videos. Starting today, I'm going to be doing some discussion videos talking about individual characters from Chainsaw Man in depth, what I think about them, what they mean to me, what I think their role in the story is, and just kind of overall what I think about them. So, what better way to start than talking about the Chainsaw Man himself, our main character Denji. Before I get into today's video, I of course have to mention my subscriber goal for 2021, hitting 5,000 by the end of the year. So, if you're already a fan of the channel and you're not subscribed, you might as well to help me reach that goal. The other thing is my Patreon. If you want to help support me and the channel directly, while also getting access to reviews for Solo Leveling and The Boxer, you can always become a patron as well. There's a link to my Patreon down in the description. With that out of the way, let's get on with the discussion. It's been a while, but I have to bring up the fact that Denji has got to be one of my favorite shonen protagonists for a couple reasons. I would say the primary one is relatability. You see, for most shonen protagonists, they have very big, grand goals. I want to, become ninja president. I want to become the #1 hero. I want to become the wizard king. Stuff like that. All very big, grand goals that are very endearing and inspiring. But for the most part, really aren't all that relatable. A lot of us have fairly big goals, at least from our perspective. But for a lot of people in the shonen demographic, that's not something they can particularly relate to. Something you can relate to is, wanting to feel some tits, wanting to get a girlfriend, stuff like that. Things that teenage boys, experience themselves firsthand. So the fact that Denji goes through these things and undergoes his development centered around them is very interesting because it's something you can actually kind of relate to. I mean, I'm getting past my teenage years now, but it's undeniable that going into high school, a lot of high school, you did kind of have the feeling of, man, I really want to get a girlfriend. This kind of feels like the biggest thing in the world. It's the end point of all life, is managing to get a girlfriend and shit like that. And for Denji, that is everything. That is the big goal. That is becoming the best hero. That is becoming the Pirate King. Is getting to have a relationship with somebody. Because Denji is a teenage boy. He's a horny 16-year-old boy. Of course, that would be the stuff that he would focus on. But in addition to that, something that's slightly less relatable, one of the less believable parts of Denji's character, or not believable, but relatable to the general audience, is that Denji has spent pretty much all of his life living in abject poverty. He lives in a shack in the middle of the woods. He eats bread for his meals almost every, I don't want to say day, because I don't think he eats every day, but every time he gets a meal. And he's been selling his body parts for money. So I would say Denji's down in the dumps more than your average Weekly Shonen Jump reader. But that amplifies his teenage desires to a far greater extent, so they're much more accentuated than they would be in an actual teen for the most part. But because they're more prominent, it's much easier to focus in on them. They're pretty much the central aspect of his character, and that's kind of what makes it so easy to relate to him. This, I feel, is a good point to transition into talking about the big word thrown around to describe Denji. Simp. Is Denji a simp? No. Denji is a victim of abuse, actually, in multiple regards. We find out later on towards the end of the story that actually his dad abused him and straight up tried to murder him, and he ended up repressing this memory and had no idea that it happened. He thought his dad had killed himself. So that's already really fucked up and very traumatizing for a child, now in the present teenager. But then we have the psychological abuse that Makima performs upon Denji, all for the sake of obtaining his chainsaw heart, but not Denji's heart, unfortunately. As Denji himself says, Makima always saw Pochita and never once saw him, so that line kind of hurt a lot, actually. That was probably the most hurtful thing to come out of the last part of Chainsaw Man, to be totally honest. That one hit close to home. That almost feels like something a real person would say after a big breakup. Maybe they found out that their partner was only with them because of their status or their money, something like that. In this case, it's a devil as his heart. But, you know, kind of translates to be the same thing. The entire story, after getting picked up by Makima in Chapter 1, Denji has been meticulously manipulated by her to turn him into as loyal a dog as possible, because Denji has never had anything. He's never had a good place to live, he's never had good food, he's never had a romantic partner, he's never had friends, he's never had a family. So Makima provides him most of these things to some regard. She leads him on to the idea that she could become his romantic partner. She gives him everything he could possibly have to lead a normal life. So it's only natural that Denji would gravitate towards her. I mean, as he says, I think she's the first person to ever give him a hug. So you have Denji, who has had nothing his entire life and is now a hormonal teenager, getting hugged by a very hot woman who has shown him the first shred of affection that he has probably ever experienced in his entire life. What do you think is going to happen? He's gonna fucking latch onto her like a leech. And that's what happens. So Denji's not a simp. Denji is doing what basically any human being who's gone through his circumstances would do. Now, Denji's interests in other women do a really good job at fleshing out his character. Reze, of course, is the conflicting love interest for him. When you think about it, him liking Reze or falling in love with Reze within like a day or a week of meeting her is kind of stupid until you remember the fact that, oh right, Denji's a teenage boy. Because I'll let you all in on a secret that many of you probably know. We guys are very easily emotionally played with. If you give a dude a compliment, he will probably think that you are in love with him. That's just how it goes. So, the fact that Denji falls for Reze so quickly is really not surprising in the slightest. Because that's just what teenage boys do. And he goes so far as to be willing to give up this whole devil hunting business just to run away with Reze at the end, which, if they were able to get away from Makima, would have actually been the best thing to do. But, you know, we'll have time to talk about Reze in a separate video, because she's one of the best characters in the series, so there's plenty to talk about with her character. But we get more expression of teenage boys' interactions and interests in relationships from that arc. And that's also very good. That's also very realistic. But then we have his relationship with Power, which is fascinating. Because when their relationship starts off, Denji kind of views Power the same way that he views, I don't want to say all other women, but all of the other women who have become very close and important to him, as a potential partner, as someone that he could end up getting with. I mean, he feels her boobs, all that stuff. Goes and even fights a big bat devil for a chance to grope her chest, to get to second base. So initially, Denji is seemingly interested in trying to get a relationship with her, which is like another teenage boy thing. There are lots of teenage boys where any girl they meet is a potential girlfriend. I've kind of experienced this myself. Not like every girl, but like as soon as you get to meet one and you talk to her and you have some kind of chemistry, you're like, oh shit, is this the one? No. But that's kind of besides the point. as the story progresses, the two of them get to know each other even better. But after getting to know Power very well, something very interesting happens. It's that he's not attracted to Power. Now this is fascinating, because in chapter 13, is it 13 or 12? Well, after Makima explains to Denji what the secret is to, tit grabbing, what makes that as amazing as it supposedly is. Because after he feels her chest, he doesn't feel anything. He undergoes an existential crisis and is like, oh shit, what if everything else I'm striving after in my life is all very underwhelming and disappointing? And Makima demonstrates to him that things like that are much more impactful when you're familiar with the person you're doing it with, which is actually very true. Generally speaking, you really only want to get intimate with someone that you know on a very deep level. That's the best way to go about it. Generally, the healthiest, the most satisfying way to go about it is doing it with someone that you know very well and trust. With Power, this doesn't happen. In fact, he even, bathes with Power. And he doesn't feel anything, because he realizes that he's not attracted to her. He views Power more as Makima intended, as a sister to him. Or at the very least as a friend. Not someone that he's romantically interested in, so he has no feelings for her. Now this is really great, because a lot of the time the main female lead always ends up being the love interest for at least one of the characters. Sometimes the main male character, sometimes one of the male supporting characters, but none of that here. They're just friends, or adopted siblings. And that's really nice, because this is kind of a really good lesson that when you are a teenage boy, you don't need to try and make every girl you meet your girlfriend. You can just be friends with them. It's totally fine. It's great, even. Because, Denji and Power's friendship is great. After they get past the trying to murder each other every day part. It's fantastic. It's a very good, healthy relationship, and I feel like that's a very good example of it. One of the big reasons I'm so interested in seeing where the story goes with Part 2 is that Denji's in a pretty great place in comparison to where he was at the start of the story. Yes, he's lost Aki and Power, and Makima is gone. Even though she was the one abusing and manipulating him, he still cared about her, which I feel like is some kind of Stockholm Syndrome thing. You can't help but stop having feelings for someone that you cared about as much as Denji cared about Makima. As foolish as that may seem, look to the reasons I gave previously. Denji is no longer under the control of Makima. He's still got Pochita with him in his heart. Nayuta is there, giving him some semblance of a family. It's probably not quite what he had wanted, but he's basically got a younger sister, or potentially an adopted daughter, I don't know. We could see what goes on with that. Kishibe is still around, so Kishibe can provide some kind of mentorship for him, and he's finally going to school so he can get an education and finally start chasing that bag once he graduates. Denji is in a better place than he's ever been in his entire life. He's got just about everything he wanted. Doesn't have a girlfriend yet, but Rezui's immortal, so hopefully she'll be back. She's never been to school either, so hopefully she'll be going. Maybe he'll make some new friends like Yoshida, who knows. But Denji's in a much better place than he was at the beginning of Chainsaw Man, and I'm quite interested to see where he's going to go from here now that things are so different for him in a better way. Will things get worse, or will things continue to improve for Denji, and he can finally live that really happy, normal life like Pochita had wanted him to? We're just going to have to find out when Part 2 comes along. But with that is all I have to say about Denji. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you don't miss any of my uploads. I do Chainsaw Man discussion videos, and I have an entire playlist full of chapter reviews from Part 1, and of course, when Part 2 starts up, I'm going to be doing chapter reviews for that, So you should subscribe if you're interested in those. If you enjoy other series such as Jujutsu Kaisen, Kengan Omega, and Record of Ragnarok, I do videos on those series as well, so if you're interested in those, you should definitely check out my channel. If you enjoy discussing Chainsaw Man with other people, or you just enjoy the content I produce on this channel, I highly suggest you check out my Discord server. I have a link to that down in the description. And since it's the end of the video, it's time to give a shout out to my wonderful patrons, Fuse, Neo, Dijon Redden, Anthony Chavez, Honey Mustard, Zach Rowitz, K-God, Chris Redfield, Moonshadow935, Rat, Ryzen 4K, and Artist. Thank you all very much for supporting me on Patreon. I greatly appreciate it. And if you too want to get a shout out at the end of videos, or access to reviews for solo leveling in the Boxer, you can always become a patron as well. There's a link to my Patreon down in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys around. Take care.